hear the end of that one for a while. Logo right there.
Yeah, really.
Is this cue though? Okay. 4, 3.
Good evening. Welcome to the Shepherd Center of Charlotte Solutions for Seniors. I'm Linda Pellerin, the Executive Director of the Shepherd Center of Charlotte, which is a nonprofit organization designed to help seniors become more involved in the community and with each other. It's a great networking organization. And our guest this evening is Phil Koch with ComForcare Home Services. I knew I would get it wrong. And he's here today to talk about some of the different things that have been going on with the home care industry in Charlotte. Now, I know about 15 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, Charlotte really didn't have any kind of home care services available. And now there's maybe 150 or so. So, what is that telling us?
Well, I think the first thing it's telling us is about, we've been talking about the baby boomers, the growth of population that would be considered years ago as the elderly population, which is really not elderly anymore. It's just active adult living. People are getting older and they're aging in place. Where we're located in Charlotte, North Carolina is a big retirement center. People are moving in to get closer to family. They're moving in because of the great hospitals and medical facilities we have. And as they move here for family reasons, for cost of living, which is inexpensive, for medical treatments, for golf, let's face it, outdoor activities, then they need assistance, not right away, but down the road. Everybody's eventually going to need a little bit of help here and there, and that's where home care comes in.
Okay, now there are a lot of different levels of home care. Mm-hmm. Can you go, explain a little bit, the differences of that?
Yeah, sometimes there's a confusion out there. There's a lot of people that confuse home health care with home care, and if I may, I'll describe the difference. Home health care, at least within the industry, is more specifically pertains to skilled nursing and therapy. That therapy could be physical therapy, which most people think about, occupational, speech, different types of therapy that assist people from coming back from a rehab, from a hospital stay, from a short-term or long-term illness, oftentimes affiliated with a hospital stay or a rehab stay, short-term rehab stay. And they go home and they still need a little bit of skilled nursing or therapy to guide them back physically to where they need to be. And they call that home health care, otherwise known as skilled nursing, where agencies will come in and provide nurses, they'll provide therapists to come into a private residence or a retirement community to provide care at the person's individual residence. Home care, or non-medical home care, otherwise known as, is not a skilled side in the eyes of the medical community. Non-medical home care, when most people say, hey, I need somebody to come in and to help my mother, to help my spouse because of various reasons, sometimes because they're getting elderly, sometimes because they've had a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a host of things, it's usually what non-medical home care provides. It's those types of caregivers that provide activities of daily living, anything from light med reminders, meal preparation, housekeeping, linen changes, transportation, all the way up to even CNA 1 and CNA 2 level care, which is positions where a state license is required in the state of North Carolina.
Okay, now there's going to be some people out there that won't know what a CNA is. Can you explain that?
Yes, a CNA stands for Certified Nursing Assistant. And in the state of North Carolina, there's 2 levels of care, but in reality, probably about 95% of the levels of care out there that truly where somebody needs personal care, then a CNA is needed. Usually a CNA 1 can handle most things out there. If it gets beyond that, certain things like, and I'm just going to give you a couple examples where a true LPN or in particular an RN through home health care would be needed, would be things like PICC lines and IV. Mm-hmm. If somebody was diabetic and they needed insulin shots, if a catheter assistance needed, an RN is more involved. A Foley bag, an RN sometimes, will oftentimes be involved. But there is a difference. Most of the personal care level needs that are out there are not done by RNs in a home environment, but usually CNA, certified nursing assistants, in the state of North Carolina. They're quite strict, and that's good for all of the residents within our state, that the state is very strict on what level type of caregiver is needed to provide the assistance with ADLs in a private residence. And ADLs stands for Activities of Daily Living, which could be, again, anything from assistance in walking, in bathing, in using the restroom, which are more personal level, where hands-on care is needed, to light housekeeping, meal preparation, transportation, etc.
Okay, now there are some instances where maybe the relative, the family member has, say, maybe Alzheimer's, and maybe it's even early onset, but they're doing some things where it may be dangerous. Maybe they're leaving the stove on, maybe they're leaving the water running, things like that.
Right.
And so they just require basic someone just to be there in the home. Now, does ComForcare provide that? I guess they call them sitters, or?
Yes, we have our company, and every company is a little bit different. In the state of North Carolina, the term CNA is usually the highest level of care in a non-medical home care agency. And there are many home care agencies in our region alone. Some are small, others are very large like us. But a personal caregiver, or CNA, is synonymous. Now, a home health aide or companion, it depends on the agency on how they express that terminology. For us, a sitter is otherwise known as a companion, where somebody would actually sit with an individual, provide care, some light meal preparation, be there in case they needed something, if they couldn't physically do it for themselves, or didn't feel comfortable with it, or sometimes, if they're just a little bit nervous by being alone. Let's say they've had a fall recently and they're nervous about somebody not being there in case they have another fall again. Well, a sitter would be a better example. A home health aide, under our guidelines, is more of somebody in between a sitter/companion and a CNA, in that they do transportation in their own caregiver's car or a family member's car of the person we're taking care of, and also a lot more housekeeping, light housekeeping, linen service. They might run errands on behalf of the family, but truly are doing more ADLs around the house that the family member themselves that we're taking care of also can't do because of a short-term or long-term situation that they're going through. It could be a dementia. It could be they have, God forbid, a disease that's making it more physically difficult for them to get around. But we can step in and provide that care. Again, short-term could be an hour a week, 3 hours a week, 1 day a week, or it could be all the way up to 24/7 care. A really nice thing about home care, non-medical home care, is the flexibility that it offers. There's retirement communities out there that are fantastic, and we have some excellent ones in the state of North Carolina, especially in the Charlotte region. But the flexibility of home care in our region is a big advantage to a lot of seniors, and in particular the families of the clients that need help. In that, well, if they don't need help next Friday and that's on the schedule, and they call up in advance, well, they don't have to have a caregiver come in, and most importantly, they don't have to pay for it. if they're going to be there instead of the caregiver?
You know, years ago, and I'm talking way, a really long time ago, when I was like a teenager, my grandmother became ill. She kept, you know, she would have a stroke or a heart attack or whatever, and in those days, you didn't really do rehab. You know, it was like go home and bed rest. You know, the poor woman was always on bed rest, and you know, they didn't have facilities for, you know, except for nursing homes, and they were few and far between. And you know, luckily for her, she was surrounded by family. Mm-hmm. And part of my job was, you know, usually on a weekend, I would go stay with her. I was the sitter for the weekend, you know, right. And my cousins and I would all take turns staying with my grandmother, and that was fine. I mean, you know, she was, you know, like you said, you know, light cooking. Trust me, with me, it was really light cooking. We about starved sometimes. I'm like, you know, what do you mean you don't want grilled cheese? I can do grilled cheese. But mostly I was there. And I mean, you know, she could get up and use the restroom and things like that, you know, and she could get up and, you know, take a bath and things. But they really wanted her to be pretty sedentary. And I was just there to make sure that she didn't have another stroke or like another heart attack, right. Or, you know, that she didn't get up and fall or something like that. And thank God she never did any of those things when I was there, because I honestly don't know what I would have done. You know, I mean, I wasn't trained, I wasn't prepared, but that's what families did. When something went wrong with a family member, another family member went in there. But in this day and age, so many families are separated. You know, the senior members of the family are not with, you know, where their children and grandchildren are. And I think that's why more and more of services like you offer are needed. And so you know, that's kind of interesting. Now, it was about 15 years ago that the Shepherd Center actually started a referral service with CNAs and sitters. Mostly it was CNAs though. And we did that. It was just a referral service, but we did that because there wasn't anything in the community. Right. For seniors. And our whole thing with the Shepherd Center is to keep seniors at home for as long as possible, right. In their home environment. And so families could call us, and we could recommend maybe 2 or 3 different people for them to call, and it was up to them how they paid them and if they hired them or whatever. And we suspended the program about 2 to 3 years ago, because we did have a lot more agencies in the community that people could go to, and more options, and we felt that it was better for them to go with the professionals who, you know, we were doing very basic background checks and things like that, and you know, we know your agencies, you know, perform, you know, better background checks and everything. You know, the employees that you hire are going to be safe to send into a home.
Yeah, for example, on that note. And that's a good point, because we go through a 10-step hiring process for our caregivers. And we average, for every 13 people that come in for an interview, on average we only hire about 1. And not to sound corny, but it's the reality that not just our company, but other large agencies, that unless our staff, who have years of experience in hiring caregivers, even if they pass all the tests, and I'm talking about personality test, skills assessment test, a background check, an extensive background check, TB test, the works. Even after everything is said and done, if our people don't feel comfortable, and this is the word per me, that individual could go in and care for that person's mother, that our office staff's mother, then don't hire them. Because in reality, you don't want to send somebody in. I mean, who wants to have somebody that the office staff themselves don't feel comfortable, even if they've passed everything and all the clearances are there? The reality of it is it doesn't get any more personal than sending a total stranger into another person's house that you love and have had a long-term relationship, a family member, unless you feel 100% comfortable that person's going to perform to the level that, you know, they would for your own family member. So it's very, very important
And you want to know that they're trustworthy. You want to know that they're not going to be, rummaging through drawers and everything, looking for that sock full of money or whatever.
That's right.
So you want to be comfortable with that. And I know families, even when we had our program going, we would all many times get calls from a family member. Well, I'm in Cincinnati, and mom needs some help, and I can't be there all the time. Or we'll get a call from we would get a call from a family member who maybe they'd be in town for the weekend or something, or for a week, and say, hey, we need to get something done here. Now let's go back to, you mentioned how people sometimes they're in rehab, or they're recovering from a stroke, or say a heart attack, or maybe they fell, broke a hip or something. What is the standard with hospitals? I mean, they have a hospital stay, and then they're released into like a rehab facility. But how long can they stay there? Are you finding that what happens is the insurance runs out and they can't stay at the facility any longer, and that's why they're sent home maybe a little bit earlier than they should be, so that they need help or they can't be on their own?
Yeah, I think there's, many years ago, I think oftentimes people would go into a hospital for a hospital visit, and instead of going into a short-term rehab, right? Because at the time, there weren't that many rehabs. There was long-term nursing facilities, and there were hospitals. So people would be discharged from hospital and go right home. Over the last 15, 20 years, a lot of the skilled nursing retirement centers or communities have created rehab centers, which has been very good for the industry, because it's a great transition from a hospital stay to a rehab center short term, and then to go home. Now, how does home care get involved? Well, some people discharge immediately from home, from a hospital right home, because they want to, or because maybe the medical community within the hospital themselves thinks they can go home, but they still need a little bit of additional care. Under those circumstances, we help. And then another there's many different ways where we get referrals, but oftentimes skilled nursing communities, and it used to be skilled nursing homes. That's not a term used as often anymore. It's not as fair, because it truly is. There's long-term beds in communities such as that, and there's rehab beds. And oftentimes it's half and half, or sometimes even more rehab, because so many of the hospitals are discharging into a rehab first for a period of time, and then discharge and go home. Either way, if they're discharged from a hospital first and go home, or go to a rehab and then go home, we can provide the care. In fact, on that note, we get a call, probably 4 or 5 calls a month, from skilled nursing communities themselves who say, there's a son here, a daughter here, a spouse here that doesn't want their mom left alone at night, and they want somebody to come in to be a companion with them, so that they're nervous, maybe they have Alzheimer's, maybe they're trying to get up in the room and walk around in later stages of dementia. And we can provide that care without taking away labor and manpower from the skilled nursing community itself.
Okay. Now, what do you need to be looking for? Say you're a family member. What do you need to be looking for when you're looking for an in-home care agency? What are the key points that people should look for?
Well, that's a good question. I think the very first thing is you need to ask for if they're state licensed in the state of North Carolina, and literally ask for a copy of it. I've been in business pushing 7 years, 6.5 years. I've only had 3 clients say, I want to see a copy of your state license. Really. Because they automatically assume, as big as we are and as large as we are, that we have it. But I'm glad to do it, and I offer to show it. But I think if I was to suggest that to anybody as a viewer to this show, would be ask for a copy of the state license for that in-home care agency. Also ask to see any awards that they've had. Ask to see a certificate of insurance showing workers' comp insurance on their employees. Make sure they're direct employees of the agency, and find out what workers' comp and general liability insurance they have on the individuals that are coming out to care for their family members. Also find out, as they say prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Make sure that the agency has a bond or some sort of theft insurance to protect in case of something bad happening. It doesn't happen that often, as much as the press sometimes says otherwise, but I think it's best to make sure you're with an agency that has protection.
Okay, now a lot of families invest in long-term care insurance, and because really does Medicare cover in-home care at all?
We get that question every day, literally. It does not. Not for any home care, non-medical home care company anywhere, and we get questions, even arguments at remote times, people saying, no, it does. Believe me, if it did, I'd be the first to know. Unfortunately, it doesn't. However, sometimes there is a confusion because in certain circumstances, home health care companies providing skilled nursing agencies or skilled nurses and therapists can allow a CNA to come in and do a bath or linen change like once or twice a week for 45 minutes or so. That's not the level of care that we're doing. We're usually much longer hours. It's more consistent hours. But occasionally, under the right circumstances, under the assessment team of the skilled home nursing agency or home health care company, they can allow that. So sometimes there's confusion there, but non-medical home care companies, Medicare does not pay for it, nor does third-party insurance. But going back to your point about long-term care insurance, I've yet to find a long-term care insurance policy that does not cover non-medical home care company. In fact, non-medical home care, and I believe skilled nursing community care, being in a skilled nursing building, are the two main reasons why people use their long-term care policy. Because after, I think it's 90 days in a skilled nursing community, I could be wrong in the 90-day period, but I think that's right, then people start to have to pay out of pocket. Medicare won't cover that. So people either get discharged and go home and say, well, if I'm going to pay out of pocket, I might as well be at home and enjoy my lifestyle at home with other family members, or because I have a pet at home often, or they discharge and go home immediately, in which case, either way, long-term care insurance will pay for a caregiver to come into their house as long as it's a licensed state approved agency.
Now, with long-term care, what if you bought the policy 20, 30 years ago? People need to look at their long-term care insurance policies too, don't they? Because what if it doesn't take into consideration cost of living?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's issues out there that a lot of people, they'll sign up for it, start paying premiums for it, whether it's quarterly, annually, or monthly, and they don't really realize or think much about it because years later it's time to use it. When they do use it, there's a couple questions they need to ask. They need to find out, or maybe to get it initially, is there an inflation rider? Meaning, as each year's cost of living increases, so does the cost of healthcare, whatever it may be. And really, they should seriously consider at least looking at an inflation rider as part of any long-term care policy. At least consider it. But when it's time to use it, a couple things. Usually, the policy, once you use it, you usually don't have to pay the premiums anymore. It's very important to know. We've had two people that didn't know that, and they kept paying the premiums every month. And another thing is the elimination period. That's a clause within the agreement itself that basically says how long they're going to have to pay out of pocket for that care when they start needing the care before the insurance company starts paying them back for the care that's needed. For example, current policies out there, commonly it's 90 days elimination period, meaning it's going to take 3 months before the insurance company will actually start paying the cost of caregiving back to either the company directly, if we were to bill directly to the insurance company, or to the family who would then turn around and pay us. A longer policy, say 15, 20 years ago, it could be a 0 elimination period. That's really good. Or even a 2-week elimination period is excellent. So some of these questions are questions worth asking for before you get the policy, but certainly when it's time to kick it and actually use the policy.
Do you think it's too late for baby boomers to get a policy?
No. In fact, unless there's a major medical reason to disqualify you to get it, I would seriously consider it even into your 70s. And again, I'm not a long-term care insurance sales person, but I can see the power that it helps families with, not just the people that need the care, but also the sons and the daughters that are truly the caregivers before an agency such as ourselves actually comes in and provides that care. So it truly isn't a one-person issue. When somebody says, I need care for myself, or someone says, I need care for my father, it's usually not just that. It's an explosion downward. If we got in this business years ago because my father-in-law needed care. Well, guess what? My mother-in-law was the caregiver to provide that care. She started getting ill because she was overworked in her mid-70s, and my wife and her two sisters were worried about the mother and the father constantly, and I'm worried about my wife and my in-laws. So now you're dealing with, instead of one person who truly needs the care, there's 7, 8, 10 different people out there that are involved in the process of caregiving.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, but I want to, you mentioned something about pets, and I want to explore that for just a second. A lot of the seniors have pets, and what happens, if they have to bring a caregiver into the home and everything, does the caregiver, take care of the pets too, or what?
They do, usually they do. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because about 2.5 years ago, we had, in a span of about 6 weeks, 8 to 10 requests from our family members who were winding services down for ComForcare, but they said, your caregiver, Karen, was also walking our dog. And even though I'm better, the dog is used to Karen. Can she just keep providing care and coming in and walking our dog, because we're not able to or not as comfortable doing it anymore. So we said, sure. So we started doing that. We opened up a company called Pet Sitters of Charlotte, and that now used by everybody of all ages. So yes, and that's another reason why many people won't sell their house and move into a retirement community, because they have a spouse, and oftentimes another family member is their pet, that they are terrified or are truly afraid of leaving their pet if they have to move into a retirement community. Well, they can have the best of both worlds.
Well, thank you, Phil.
Sure.
I think we explored a lot of the in-home care options available to seniors. Again, Phil Koch is with ComForcare. I'm not going to say the other two words because I keep forgetting them.
ComForcare Home Care.
There we go. And I thank you for being here today. Our program next month will be with Lynn Ivy, and she has a senior daycare center, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But visit the Shepherd Center. We're online, www.shepherdscharlotte.org, or just give us a call, 704-365-1995, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.